Great to be joined here on Flow FM by Ishka Bless. She is a PhD candidate with the School of Agriculture, Food and Wine at Uni of Adelaide and Uni of Nottingham. Ishka, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We are talking today about a bit of a roadshow you're putting on to encourage people to consider, can we call it a meat alternative? What is it that you're putting forward?
Yeah, so we're discussing edible insects, which are a protein alternative.
All right, we're talking insects here. Now, talk about the possibility of insect-based meals. You've sent us a photo of a bagel. Is that mealworm in the bagel?
That's correct. So that's a smashed avo bagel with a bit of a crispy mealworm crumble on top.
And so let's start with the human individual benefits. What is the benefit of someone eating insect-based food rather than, say, beef?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's growing interest in eating insects as an alternative source of protein. And that's not to say our only source of protein, but another option that we can eat to help us diversify our everyday diet so that we're not as reliant on traditional livestock, like, as you said, beef. And insects have gained particular attention for their nutritional profile and their low environmental impact. So, for example, species such as mealworms are high in protein, micronutrients and healthy fats. And if we look at the environmental side, they can be reared on byproducts from the agri-food industry. They require little land and water, and they produce low greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a pretty good combination if we're looking at an alternative protein.
And this is where, some people might be getting suddenly a bit agitated that we're talking about eating something other than beef. But for our farmers out there, this could be an alternative, form of farming, or as you say, something run in adjunct with other forms of farming. I know that some wine producers produce maggots for some reason alongside of what they're doing for other purposes. So it's not necessarily a case of it's this one or the other.
Absolutely, you're right there, Ricky. So it is looking at just providing us with another option. So you're very correct there. And if we look at the farming process, it can be run alongside other more traditional farming as well.
And so you mentioned it there before, is better, to paraphrase, better for the environment. Why is consuming insect-based, I don't know if we'll call it meat, we'll come to that in a minute, but something that's insect-based, why is that better for the planet than, say, beef or sheep?
Yeah, so if we look at edible insects such as mealworms, which are one of the main commercial species that we're looking at in terms of research, in comparison to traditional livestock, they require less land and water, they produce less greenhouse gas emissions, and they can also be reared on byproducts from the agri-food industry. So, for example, things like wheat bran or spent brewer's grain as well.
So tell us a bit more about that farming process. I mean, they're not going to roam around in a paddock, these insects. Like you say, it's a smaller footprint. Just say with mealworms, what does that farming look like?
Yeah, no problem. So if we're talking large scale, they're raised in a controlled environment, and that's in line with food safety regulations and typically fed on, as I said, byproducts from the agri-food industry. And this means that we have ample supply of feed and can scale as we need to. When we look at the actual processing of those insects, when the insect reaches full size, they're removed from their feed and then they're cleaned. Then after about a day, they're frozen and a heat treatment like blanching is applied, which is a common food processing method. Then in Australia, they're most often oven roasted or oven dried, you may hear, ready for consumers to purchase.
All right, and so when it just comes to, around the world, there are cultures or places, one of our staff said over in Southeast Asia they'd eaten some forms of insects. It's something Australians have generally not tucked into, but it is some parts of the world they do have insects on the menu.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So insects have actually been eaten for thousands of years and continue to be eaten in many countries today. And they're eaten in many different ways, from pan-fried to deep-fried, for example. So you will find a lot of different cuisines that do incorporate insects in a variety of different methods as well.
Now, I'm always up for trying something new out. The spicier the better, by the way. But is there an opportunity you're going to create in some of our broadcast areas for people to have a go or at least simulate eating an insect product?
Yeah, that's right. But as you said, that keyword is simulate. So we'll be providing a virtual experience of insects as food. In terms of what that looks like, with support from Inspiring SA, we've collaborated with local arts organisations, Post Dining and Monkey Stack to develop an AR experience and educational video. So at the pop-up events running across South Australia, participants will be seated at a communal dining table, watch a short video just like they would on the telly at home, and then learn about the flavours and textures of common edible insects like mealworms and crickets before getting to design an insect-based dish, which they can then view in augmented reality. And that means that the dish will be superimposed through their phone on the table in front of them. So it gives them a bit of an experience of eating insects, but it will be virtual, so they won't actually be tucking into them at the time. And they will also be able to look at different preparation methods, for example, from dehydrating to deep frying, different levels of visibility, for example, ground to whole, and as you mentioned, different flavours as well. So some people may prefer sweet, some may prefer spicy. So we're giving people an opportunity to have a look at different things, to challenge themselves, but also start a conversation about insects as food. And given there won't be any insects actually in the experience, we do have some take-home recipes as well, so people can give them a go at home if they'd like to.
So you talk about people actually sinking their teeth into an insect-based meal at home. I mean, how do people source that? Where might they, if they want to give it a go, where could they get insects from?
Yeah, so currently in Australia, you can purchase insects online. So we have a few different supplies available, and that would mainly be crickets or mealworms in their oven-dried form, but you can also purchase ants as well. So some in South Australia may be familiar with the green ant gin or the Woodside cheese, right, green ant goat cheese as well.
Yes, no, I am familiar with that gin, actually. I've got to get a bottle. Thanks for reminding me. Before we go, where are we heading with the naming of this, when it comes to the market? Are they going to be always described as insect-based, or are we calling it meat? Where are things heading on what we describe this type of product as?
Well, product naming is a really important discussion when it comes to our food, and that's not only from a communication perspective, but also when we're talking about allergies as well. So researchers are currently exploring naming, but currently in Australia, you'll find that most products do have the insect type in the name, for example, mealworms or crickets, or as you said, green ants in that case. But at the University of Adelaide, we're also conducting research to help better describe the flavour and texture of those insect products so that people can get a bit of an understanding of what it will actually taste like when they're looking at it on the supermarket shelf.
Yeah, and into the mix of all of that recipe as well is the debate we're having with the European Union about, place of origin type naming. I guess it becomes important, especially given the diversity of insect species out there, that if someone's tucking into our insects, they're not tucking into a cheap imitation from elsewhere.
Yeah, well, they are important discussions with any novel food that will need to be explored.
Absolutely. Well, Ishka Bless, it's great to pick that apart with you. I'm sorry I don't get a chance to tuck into a cricket, but I have to go find one myself. But it's all right. That virtual experience, I think you're heading to Mount Gambier with that sometime soon. Is that right?
That's correct. We will be in the coming weeks going to the Riddoch Arts and Cultural Centre for a day.
So if people want to find out more, if they want to use this virtual experience, see it all play out on their phones, where could they find out a bit more about it?
Yeah, they can head online. So if you look up everyday entomophagy, we'll have some information under that. But they can also have a look after the program. We'll have those resources available if you don't get to come along to the program. So there will be more opportunities.
Well, that was Ishka Bless, PhD candidate with the Universities of Adelaide and Nottingham. Thanks so much for joining us today on Flow FM.
My pleasure. Have a lovely afternoon.